An Oklahoma law that went into effect July 1st has displaced some registered sex offenders who had turned to an Oklahoma City ministry for help getting back on their feet. The law is raising more questions about how far the state needs to go to restrict those offenders who have already served their time.
These tents went up on the property of Up Ministries in Oklahoma City on July 1st. That was the day an Oklahoma law took effect, which restricts how many registered sex offenders can live under the roof of a modular housing unit.
The tents are our attempt to provide what we can for those who this bill has forced out of their home.
Chris Hallra is the office manager and a spiritual counselor at Up Ministries.
So it is expected that men will come here, re-enter society, reintegrate into society, build themselves a good financial foundation, find good employment, and also, but more importantly, a good spiritual foundation.
He says prior to the law, they housed 3 sex offenders in each of the modular housing units. They are located in this gated community where no women or children are allowed. In each unit, the men shared a kitchen and a bathroom but had separate bedrooms. Now, only 1 offender can live in each space. 50 others are now calling these tents their homes. One of them is 59-year-old Malcolm Sanders, who served 4 years in prison for downloading child pornography. He says the treatment he received in prison helped him turn his life around and that this new law is uncalled for.
When people put a sort of a double indemnity on you that, well, I've been through one of the heaviest programs in the system, passed the polygraphs, was honest, was open, learned how to have empathy for people and for women, children, men, everyone.
Sanders and others here feel they're being further ostracized from society.
You can't live within 2,000 foot of a school, a registered daycare, or a park, okay? That knocks out 85% of the whole city automatically. Then you're looking at people that you try to rent from. Your license or your ID here in Oklahoma is stamped 3 times on the front of it with sex offender.
Chris Spears served 8 years in prison for lewd molestation and sodomy for a crime he committed 20 years ago. Spears says he has never reoffended. Suffering from congestive heart failure, Spears found himself homeless when he could no longer live with his sister.
At the time that I was out, I was actually living on the street. It was like 20-degree weather. I had a hoodie, that's all I had. But my sister had moved, and she had moved into what we call a red zone, which is where sex offenders can't live.
Oklahoma City Police Chief Bill City says he encouraged lawmakers to pass the legislation affecting modular housing because there was a gap in the intent of the law.
We saw it back in 2010, started seeking some legislative changes that would actually define what a multi-housing unit would be. And a single unit would include a kitchen, a bath, its own bath, they aren't shared, those types of things, so that we could hold what we thought is what the legislator's true intent was of the law, that only 1 sex offender could live in a single dwelling. They could not live with another sex offender.
Chief City says they became aware of the loophole in the law when trying to prosecute a registered sex offender who was living at Up Ministries for molesting a boy in a theater in 2009.
Our concern would be that if they reoffend in the case like we had in 2009, then any evidence that we find, who does that evidence belong to? Which sex offender did it belong to? Did it belong to the one we were investigating, or did it belong to the one that he was living with, or the 2 or 3 that he was living with?
The chief believes the many restrictions on sex offenders stems from this.
Part of the problem I think you have is that sex offenders have such a higher rate of recidivism. You know, I mean, it's very hard for a sex offender to be rehabilitated. I mean, that's just the statistics. That's just the data.
Ryan Kiesel, who is the executive director for the American Civil Liberties Union of Oklahoma, disagrees.
Recidivism rates for sex offenders aren't really out of line with other criminal acts. We know that most sex abuse does not occur at the hands of a stranger. It occurs at the hands of someone the victim knows personally.
He says Oklahoma laws regarding sex offenders have become too restrictive.
Once they have served their sentence, We have to look as a state, what's in the best interest of the state? Do we continue to punish these folks? Do we give them a life sentence that makes it impossible for them to exist in any community whatsoever? Or do we try to help them become productive members of society?
On that point, Chief City concurs.
It's much more difficult now based on the law and the restrictions that they have. And I think in some cases those restrictions are probably a little bit too restrictive and not probably necessary. But that's obviously a political decision, and all we do is enforce the law.
City says if Up Ministries continues to make efforts to conform to the current law, no one is at immediate risk of being arrested. The ministry says it will be filing a federal appeal to alleviate their predicament.
And we are hoping, in a best-case scenario, once the federal appeals court has the case in hand, they will say, for right now, we need to suspend enactment of this law for right now until we can get this worked out. At that point, we can disassemble the tents and men can go back to their homes.
In the meantime, the displaced registered sex offenders at Up are hoping for cooler weather or at least a good steady breeze.